Hey, everybody, welcome to tonight's Late Night Happy Hour. Brian Kamenetzky and Andy Kamenetzky joined tonight by a great baseball writer getting us ready for Game 6 tomorrow. JP Hoornstra of the Southern California News Group does great work. You see him on Spectrum. You see him in the paper as much as you can see a person in the paper and online and on the many, many places to find all of his work. JP, thanks so much for coming on, man. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I wanted the full Rams introduction though, with the elongated O.
Well, in the beginning,
San Lagana. I mean, obviously, this everybody understands the St. Louis Blues thing. Andy and I grew up in St. Louis. I'm a big Blues fan. Got very excited. I also do have this. Is it too homery for me to wear?
No.
This? Okay, cool. Because it's cold in my house.
I've worn a Laker shirt on this show multiple times.
Right, but I will say, I like the Dodgers. I'm rooting for them. I love the uniforms, and it's be great for the city. But I'm not like a diehard Dodger fan. I hate being. Where do you come down on gear, JP? Because I am really sensitive to the idea of wearing team gear for teams that I am not 100% diehard for.
Sure, I don't wear team gear, period, when I'm in the press box. I don't.
Well, that would be wrong.
No, I don't really wear. I'm trying to think the last time I even wore, around the house, I'll have gym shirts, right? For teams. But I will say this, maybe the biggest effect, one of the biggest effects of the pandemic on my household is that those rally towels that they give out at Dodger games during the playoffs make the best dust rags, and we aren't getting any this October.
Yeah, we've got a few of those around this house as well. I mean, and you are correct; they're actually phenomenal. They're very thick. They're very absorbent. Yeah. They're a very good size. They're not too big, but they're not too small. They are actually a pretty solid towel. I absolutely agree with that. The only person I think that actually ever wore team gear in the press box was Vic the Brick.
Vic, I think he was sort of grandfathered in with that rule. You are really not.
Well, no, he wasn't grandfathered in with any rule. Vic just didn't care. Vic is Vic, and the rest of us are subject to the rules.
There was a guy, I came up in the Bay Area, and there was a dude for the Oakland Tribune. His name was Jack Rux, and he would wear an A's hat to every single assignment, whether it was NASCAR or football or just the A's hat, always. He was grandfathered into.
I will wear occasional. I've worn my Blues hat, baseball hat to Lakers practice before. I've done that. I've worn out of market sports teams hats. I've seen people wear the college that they went to, stuff like that. But I've never worn, and I would never wear this. To a late October Dodger game where it was chilly. I'm not doing that. That's poor form.
You would wear the Blues hat.
I would. I actually would probably, but I wouldn't wear the Dodger hat.
I think there is a degree where we can say if the athletes can do it, why is it so bad if we do it too? Right? If LeBron wears the Yankee hat, for example, around town,
right.
Okay.
But I thought for a second there, I thought you were going to say the athletes wear it, so I can too. Meaning I should wear the uniform, Dave Roberts does.
You know what's funny though? I hadn't even thought about this before for a while, but I have a Lakers ski cap that I've actually felt extremely self-conscious wearing into Staples Center when I've been covering a game.
Yeah,
even though it's it'd be a January, February game where it's functionally I need this hat because it's 40 degrees out. And for me, that's cold, with a lack of coverage. But I feel like somehow I'm being unprofessional by wearing that hat just into the building. No, I'm not. I'd be unprofessional if I was wearing it during the game.
Well, you could just get a second hat.
Well, I eventually did. I had multiple hats by now, but that was actually the point where I realized I needed more ski caps because that one made me feel perhaps unnecessarily like I wasn't being professional.
I get it. I totally get it.
So what would be if you had to wear one hat into a game that was a specific team, what hat would it be?
Oh God, now I'm really on the spot. You know what? I would probably, this is going to sound a little bit blasphemous given what we're, going to talk about here. But, I grew up in the San Jose area, and the San Jose Giants were probably the team that I saw the most, the professional team that I saw the most growing up. When I was in high school, my baseball team, we got to play on their field for like a
That's fun.
CIF semifinal game. So that like sentimentally would probably be the choice.
Okay, that's fair. And that keeps you out of trouble because it's just the minor league team.
Right, exactly.
Dan Woike from the LA Times actually had a great tweet last night regarding, before we get too deep into the series, regarding the hats that the Rays were wearing yesterday.
I saw him.
As the single ugliest hat that has ever been worn in a World Series. Can anybody argue with that? Those things were atrocious.
I couldn't even tell you what number 2 is. Like, seriously.
I mean, first of all, gigantic. Like, can you possibly make your logo bigger? Ugly, doesn't match the rest of the Rays actually don't deserve to win this series because they have horrible uniforms.
Maybe like the D-backs in 2001 had some pretty ostentatious purples and teals going on there, but at least
it was of the era.
That's right. It was truly authentic.
Could I make the argument that hat that they were wearing yesterday, that Rays hat, is a form of animal cruelty? Like, I mean, it feels like it was incredibly disrespectful and even endangering to Rays. Like, I think Rays will be less protected as a species and less cared about as a result of that hat. Like, they really did the Rays as a species a disservice.
Beyond just the mere ugliness of it, I also am really intellectually bothered by the idea that there's a ray of sunshine in the word Rays on the jersey, and there's a stingray on the hat. What kind of array are they? I don't know.
Pick a lane, Tampa. But it is indicative of like the uniforms that they are wearing look like the uniforms that the other team wears in the game, in the movie, where you don't get the licensing for Major League Baseball. Like, you know, they have the most generic font you can possibly find, just Rays. It's awful. Everything about those uniforms is awful, and they don't like, you cannot be that poorly dressed and expect to win a World Series. Not against the Dodgers.
No, the contrast is marked. It's not. Yeah, it's just one of the most classic all-time baseball uniforms.
Awful. Do you think? I mean, JP, because you know baseball, like the world of baseball better than we do. You know, we cover the Dodgers for a few years, you know, on a day-to-day basis. But you've been doing this for a long time. Is that logo the result of the Rays being a small market team, small budget, and just not being able to do better?
Like, can they not afford a better hat?
Like if the Red Sox with their budget were the Rays, would they have a better logo, do you think? Like, is that the best they can afford?
You know, I don't know. I should be a little bit more read up on the history of the origin of the Tampa Bay Rays, Devil Rays originally. But here's what I will say is that, you know, in 1993, right, we got the Marlins and the Rockies. And if you looked at their uniforms, which the Rockies still basically wear, they were classic pinstriped, serif fonted across the chest, baseball looking uniforms, right? And then in 98, we got the Diamondbacks and the Rays. And just besides the total mouthful that the Diamondbacks and Devil Rays presented, the uniforms were themselves just a hard left turn from baseball tradition. And that had to have been by design. The D-backs, almost a little bit too much evolved from that point. And the Devil Rays made that one change, going from the Devil Rays to the Rays, switching to the uniform with the ray of sunshine on them. And it was almost too little thought put into it, maybe. So very much of the time. But I think the Devil Rays and the Diamondbacks, they just said, look, we're the last in the door. Let's be different. What the hell?
It didn't work. They need to fix that. So, I mean, it's a shame because they got lots of good players and smart management, and they need better uniforms. All right, here's where I want to start, because Dodgers obviously in just it was a fantastic game on Sunday. But they're up 3-2. Can you walk us through the logic of how they're handling Game 6 with Tony Gonsolin? Because there were a lot of people who I think wanted Walker Buehler to come back on short rest. And it obviously isn't happening. And there was like no decision there. Can you take us through that whole thing?
Sure. Their thought process on Gonsolin specifically has kind of evolved in the postseason. I think originally there was this idea that Tony Gonsolin and Dustin May would kind of piggyback is maybe not the best word, but they would tag team the fourth starter's job, right? You had Kershaw, Buehler, Urias, and then whoever we got on that day, whoever has the hot hand, let's ride them as long as we can. And sometimes that worked. Like, I think it was 8 days ago now when, the NLCS game where Urias came in and pitched the final 3 innings, and you saw Gonsolin, May, and like 3 other dudes pitch the first 6. You saw it work there. Like, it worked well enough to win the game, obviously. But several times it just hasn't worked. And Gonsolin, I think, between the two of them, has really yet to be the guy he was in the regular season. And I think now what we're seeing is the Dodgers taking a step back and saying, we had you pitching every 6th day from July through September. And then, sometimes circumstances out of your control didn't allow Tony Gonsolin to pitch in the first 2 rounds. And so he went 17 days between games. He didn't look sharp. He still hasn't looked sharp. And now they're saying, all right, Tony, you pitched in game 2. Don't pitch. Don't pitch until you're fully rested. Do your normal workouts. Throw your normal bullpen. Come back out here in game 6 and go as long as you can. Dave Roberts said today, I would love this guy to just be a 5 or 6 inning starter. And then
over how many games?
Oh, that's not nice. That's mean.
When's the last time
that's
Gonsolin's
mean,
gone
Andy.
5 to 6 innings in a
That's
game?
mean.
Yeah, no, it's been a while. I mean, to your point, like
Little League? Like, it's been a minute.
No.
he was
Professional.
All right, I'm going to look this up.
This year, to your point, Andy, like this year, my sense of time is totally warped. Like I have just no sense for when anything is happening on a calendar, but the calendar tells me like the regular season ended less than a month ago, and Gonsolin was a pretty good pitcher then.
Okay, he did. I stand corrected. He had a very active month in September where 5 games he pitched no fewer than 5 innings.
Yeah.
And solid 3.41 ERA. So I guess
Screw you, Andy, says Tony
Well,
Gonsolin. Or so I say on Tony Gonsolin's behalf.
Well, but I mean, in the playoffs, it's gotten decreasingly fewer innings. It's gone from 4.1 to 2.0 to 1 1/3. Can't go much lower than that. So that's my point. Anyway,
Yeah,
continue.
point taken. No, it was they were rolling the dice by going with this plan. I mean, but if Gonsolin can be that pitcher after having, adequate rest, something of a normal routine, not having to get warmed up in the bullpen for a possible relief experience, none of that, like this should be the Tony. They're thinking that this is giving Tony Gonsolin the best chance so far to be the Tony Gonsolin he was in the regular season.
So why did they not consider Buehler?
Ask Dave Roberts about that today. Game 7 is a safety net, really. They want to win tomorrow. Don't mistake this for them punting. But who would you want in game 7? A bullpen game or a rested Walker Buehler? Just because Walker Buehler pitches doesn't mean he's going to win. And if you lose game 6, now you're in a really bad way. But if they lose game 6 behind Gonsolin and probably Dustin May and a few relief pitchers, you've got Buehler in 7 rested. That's just the more desirable scenario. That's it.
Do you expect it to be like a similar approach to what we saw in game 2? I mean, like in terms of that potential mix and match, but also, I mean, the same assortment of options, maybe utilized in similar fashion, that sort of thing.
I think if it is that, it's because Tony Gonsolin has not done what the Dodgers wanted him to do. That would be kind of a worst case scenario.
Okay.
I think it'll be interesting to see what they do if he gets into trouble early. Do they let him try to work out of it, be a starting pitcher, right? Use his full arsenal, reach into his bag of tricks, try to mix things up and give, the Rays hitters a different look. Or do they go straight to Dustin May and maybe Urias? I don't know. But I think if you see what you saw in game 2, it's because Gonsolin didn't have it tomorrow.
That's interesting though, because Dave Roberts has even acknowledged that guys like Gonsolin and May, and Gonsolin, I mean, May actually had a good showing in Game 5, but both of them have struggled in these last couple rounds. And Roberts has conceded that what they're being asked to do is different than their normal roles, and for young, less experienced pitchers, that can be a problem. And I wonder how much Gonsolin would benefit psychologically from feeling like he actually has a longer leash, and like, the idea that I can pitch myself into a certain amount of rhythm without worrying that my hook is going to be really quick.
Right. Like, honestly, I think that's a really good point. I think the number one thing the Dodgers can do to give him that feeling is to score a whole bunch of runs early.
Right. Do what they did for Kershaw.
Right. Their lineup is going to give him a longer leash than Dave Roberts ever can. So, that's going to mean more to him than it does to Blake Snell for the Rays, I think.
So who's available? Because a lot of people are asking the question, and I had the same one. Like, is Urias available for Game 6, or they want to hold him for Game 7? How much can May pitch tomorrow? Given that granted there's an off day in between, but he pitched, in Game 5. So, like, who is available for how long? And how much do they feel like they need to save someone, whether it is May or Urias, just in case Buehler isn't available? Buehler doesn't go as long as they want. He struggles. They need 2 innings from someone or whatever. Because you can't throw Kershaw again. Like, Clayton Kershaw's done for this series, correct? Like, they're not going to do that to him, are they? Please say no. Please say they're not going to do that.
I think the Dodgers don't want to do that to him. I think Clayton might want to do it to himself, because he's got kind of a hero complex about these whole October late game situations. We'll see. But I don't
think they should let him in the stadium. I don't want him anywhere near. He should not be allowed to play over the next. They should deactivate him. I feel very strongly about this.
He's going to pinch run in the 19th inning, man.
He used to be a decent hitter for a pitcher. I mean, like, maybe you satisfy him by saying we're not going to throw you, but we will keep you as a pinch hitting option that we know, given the DH, is never going to happen. But, just keep it in your back pocket to keep him satisfied.
Well, 2 things to think about here. One is that they brought 15 pitchers to this series. So running out of pitchers is not going to be an issue for the Dodgers. That's somewhat counterbalanced by the fact that some guys have been a lot more effective than others. And really, like, the 10 relievers that they brought, you've seen the series. Some days they're awesome, other days they aren't, and you just don't really know what you're going to get until you throw them out there. Trinan looked really good yesterday. I would, if I'm Dave Roberts, what I'm thinking here is that Trinan's probably my dude in the 9th inning, all other things being equal. Maybe it's 3 lefties and you go to Kolarek or McGee or Victor Gonzalez or Urias in the right situation. But ideally, like Trinan's probably the one guy you want to hold back for such a scenario. Gratterall looked pretty good Game 5 too. So if you're lining up Game 7, as that sort of safety net, you figure Buehler is probably trained to go longer than Gonsolin is. And so if you're the Dodgers, realistically, I think you can count on a game in which Walker Buehler hands the game to his best relief pitchers. And you can get through a game that way. And if you have to bring in Urias, you do that. But for this one, for Game 6, can any of those guys do back-to-back? Sure, maybe not Urias. You probably get one bullet in the Julio Urias gun here, and you either use them in 6 or 7. But like all your other relief pitchers, you just ride the hot hand, and you hope that works. But really, you hope Tony Gonsolin gives you more than 4 innings.
That's fascinating to me, though, because in terms of the gamesmanship, JP, because the restraint, like, it's one thing, the Dodgers get shut out in the first inning, second inning, or whatever, and then they give up 6 runs in the first 2 innings. It's like, okay, now you can throw Alex Wood. You can do whatever. You can kind of just punt the game and make sure your bullpen and everything is 100% intact, and you have every pitcher available to you. Where it gets really tricky is if it's a 4-3 game in the 5th. Or 4-3 in the 3rd, or whatever it might be. And now you got to decide, do we try to, because every game you play is another game where something bad can happen and weird thing and whatever, and you might lose. But at the same time, if you compromise yourself in game 6, you can compromise yourself in game 7.
I will say this. I more than most people on Twitter, I don't really lean too far into the second guessing of managers. But I will say this.
So you're the one.
I will say
you must
that
not
Dave
spend
Roberts,
a lot of time on Twitter then.
You guys follow me. It's mostly updates of what's happening.
By the way, that's a very we're not criticizing you. You're actually the one guy who figured it out.
It's all silly. Try not to take it too seriously. That's my only Twitter advice. The worst mistake Roberts has made in this postseason was asking Pedro Baez to go out for a second inning after saying you're done for the day.
That was bizarre. I've never heard of that happening before.
I've never heard of it either. And Roberts was at least smart enough to say, look, that was my bad for even letting him go out there again in game 4. Prior to that, though, to hark back to your point, which I think was a good one, is that he's mistaken those two scenarios for each other. In other words, I can remember, oh God, they all kind of blend together, but there was an NLCS game where it looked like it was slipping away from them and it just wasn't going to be very close. And he threw Adam Kolarek out there and let him go probably a little bit too long. And at that point in the game, it didn't look like it would matter. I want to say now this is game 3 of the NLCS. But then the Dodgers came back and they ended up making it close. And in retrospect, you could say, well, why did Kolarek, who clearly didn't have it, or at least was not pitching against the guys he should have been pitching against, allowed to stay in there for that long? And I think it's really incumbent on Dave and his staff not to make that mistake, right? So if you do get into a scenario where it's 4-3, that you manage it accordingly. But if it does turn into, like, say, a 5-0 game one way or the other, that you don't count out that score from getting close in a hurry, because we've seen that happen and that could come back to bite them.
Yeah, what I think is really interesting is, this potentially setting up as a bullpen game. There's an irony because that's the area where Dave Roberts is criticized the absolute most in terms of how he manages the bullpen, the order in which he implements these guys. And game 5 ended up kind of this weird referendum on Roberts's decisions, because when he pulled Kershaw, you actually had the rare reaction on Twitter of everybody saying, keep him in the 6th, keep him in the 6th, even though the 6 has been it's been his traditional kryptonite. You had people begging to keep him in. Gonzalez seemed like a dicey decision in the moment. I know I was a little nervous about it. It ended up working. Dustin May surprised some people coming in, especially coming off a couple of shaky appearances that ended up working. And it's just like a reminder of how baseball, because it's such a sport set in failure, like so many of what ends up smart or not smart is just result based. Process obviously matters, but these are all decisions that could have just as easily gone sideways. But in this case, they worked, and it wasn't always pretty over the course of it, but they ended up working. So it's like he made the right decisions, even if you look at them going like, oof, like at times you're really, really nervous about the decisions he made.
And you can make the wrong decision as a manager and still get away with it. I don't know if that's actually what happened in game 5 or not. It may have been. If you go back and look again, it's hard to remember, I know, but the Dodgers had a really good bullpen in the regular season. And so not only that, but it was like not 1 or 2 guys doing it, but it was like 8 dudes who you genuinely could have felt good about going into October. And so I think that their strategy, if you really put yourself back to the beginning of the postseason, to not designate specific innings or specific runs of hitters for specific relief pitchers, was wise, because it looked like a very interchangeable group. So you dial it back again 3 weeks ago and you think, hey, Victor Gonzalez for a run of tough lefties and righties? Sure, why not? That's who Victor Gonzalez was for most of the season, was a guy who could do that. Did he have a couple bad games in October? Yes. But I think what you saw there in game 5 was Dave Roberts saying, I'm going to bet on Victor Gonzalez being the dude he's been most of this season. And I think that was smart. Easy to say in hindsight, right? But if you put yourself in the moment still, I think that's very justifiable. And you could also make the argument too that, like, because none of these guys have really stepped up to have just an awesome postseason, like none of these guys is 2017 Kenley Jansen.
That
None of
is
these
true.
guys.
Like,
in
yeah, there's
2017
nobody
Brandon
coming into
Morrow,
any of
right?
these games where you feel as a Dodger fan like,
Well,
oh, great.
I
This
mean, but
guy,
that's
yeah.
a big reason why Clayton Kershaw's had to suffer through so much shit is because the Dodgers have rarely had that bullpen configuration where, I mean, they had Jansen in his prime years, and then I'm forgetting who used to set him up that was actually really good. I'm trying to remember.
Brandon Morrow was the dude.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah.
the one dude.
Yeah. But like other than that, you've had this just crapshoot that's led to Kershaw being out there when he's clearly gassed. But, both Mattingly and Roberts have been in positions where it's like, I trust Clayton Kershaw with his arm almost falling off more than these other guys. And it's like, I get it. I get why you're making that decision. It looks like a terrible one, but I get it.
Right. And I think part of the criticism is kind of personal almost, where you don't wish that on Kershaw specifically.
Mhm.
It's not just playing the numbers, it's playing the man. And you see how good Clayton Kershaw is, you see how hard he works, you see how much he cares, and you just don't want failure for him.
That's why I want him to not be allowed in the stadium. I don't want him to have, I don't want the temptation to be there for Dave Roberts to make Clayton Kershaw a hero. Like he gutted that game out, like, game of inches. Like, what happens if Rosarena is safe at home? Like, but like all of these things, it wasn't
Margot.
Thank you. Margot was safe at home. But like, I don't want the temptation to be there for Roberts. This may get deeper into rank speculation than you want to go, but how big of a risk was it for Roberts to put May back in the game? Like, if that blows up, given how he's pitched, is he taking like a significant risk with some of these bullpen decisions, i.e., like, how threatened would his job be if the bullpen screws this up?
Yeah. I don't think his job would have been threatened specifically because of that move. But I think one thing, and hopefully this isn't, let's get wonky. What the heck? Let's do it.
That's a great quote. I'll tweet that.
Yes.
I think that one of the things that fans forget most easily when it comes to bullpen decisions is that it's part of it is, how has this guy done lately? Sure. And with Dustin May, it's not great. Certainly as a relief pitcher, but it's also, how do these pitchers look on a mound to a hitter relative to each other? So if I'm Randy Arozarena, if I'm the Rays' best hitter, and I see, if I see your starter for the first two times, and the starter is a right-handed pitcher, or let's use Kershaw. Let's say I've got Clayton Kershaw my first two times up, and then my third time up, I see Dustin May, who's throwing 8 miles per hour faster, who's 2 or 3 inches taller, and who's right-handed. That's a big adjustment. That's a big adjustment for me to make. And so, I would really have to go back and look at specific at bats, but that's a big part of the strategy, is going from a Victor Gonzalez, who's a left-handed pitcher, throws a completely different repertoire, from Dustin May, who's this just ginormous right-hander throwing 102 mile per hour fastballs. In theory, that should work. And that's a very difficult adjustment, even for a major league hitter. The fact that it hadn't worked to that point somewhat defied reason. I think the best thing that you could say is that May, like Gonsolin, had been thrown off of his routine. They tried using him as a relief pitcher in the postseason last year. That really didn't work either. And I think until yesterday, really, you could say the jury was out on whether this guy could actually be trusted to relieve baseball games at all.
Yeah.
Totally valid criticism. But again, let's go back to it. Who else do you go to, right? Like, there isn't that one guy who's just lights out every time you throw him.
Because that's fine. Because like, even Gratterall, like, people were really upset that in game 4, the math of these things just crushes me. I can't do it. But in game 4, like, why not keep going with Gratterall? People forget Gratterall throws 100 miles an hour, but he doesn't miss a lot of bats. It's not like he's one of these guys that just mows through people and is going to strike out the side. He hasn't been that guy. So that part of it isn't as relevant as I think a lot of fans want it to be just because he throws really freaking hard. I think that May wasn't missing a lot of bats. I thought I think confused a lot of people too.
Definitely. Some of May's, signature moments on a baseball field are throwing these wicked breaking balls that make opposing hitters look stupid. And you wonder, why can't he do that every time? And it's little wonky things like a hitter being able to pick up the arm angle and knowing what pitch is coming and being able to lay off of that stupid breaking pitch. It's stuff like that. And it happens. Remember, guys, these are the best hitters on the planet. You're not going to be able to fool them as well as you do during the regular season.
I mean, what's funny to me, and this has been, I think, really just sort of fascinating, and I'm always reminded of this. The 3 years that we covered the Dodgers, day in, day out for the LA Times, 2 of those years were Grady Little, and then the last one was the first full year of Joe Torre. And one of the things that I thought was really funny in terms of hearing fan reaction, whether from our writing or when we're on the air with 710, is so many of the criticisms that fans had about Grady Little. Doesn't know how to manage a bullpen, gives way too much deference to veteran players as opposed to younger players that are better, were the exact same criticisms that they had of Joe Torre. I mean, literally, they were the exact same thing. Like, if memory serves, Joe Torre blew out Scott Proctor's arm on 2 coasts. He ended up doing it in New York and in LA. But Joe Torre would always get, he could get criticism, but he would always get a benefit of the doubt because he's Joe Torre, and he earned that. And he's obviously a better manager than Grady Little. That's not my point. But when you watch any manager on a day in, day out basis, same with any coach. We covered Phil Jackson for years. Phil is arguably the greatest coach in NBA history. Fans would find stuff that they'd be upset with him about on a daily game-to-game basis. And it's just because anybody under that type of microscope, you're not going to like what you see.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think you're speaking to two different things there. One is that managers are prone to making the same mistakes over and over again. They're human beings, just like all of us. I don't choose a different new mistake to make every day.
You stick with the ones that work.
I stick with the ones that work. Sometimes I forget to scoop the cat litter. I'm sorry. That's on me. It happens a lot. But look, Dave Roberts, he sometimes, just drops the ball with the bullpen. And we saw that with Pedro Baez in Game 4. We've seen him leave Clayton Kershaw in there too long, which I think is an easy mistake to make when you're managing arguably the best pitcher of all time, certainly of this generation. These things happen. And so there's right for criticism there. The other thing that you're speaking to is how often you tell me, guys, how often did people call into 710 to say what an awesome job the coach did that day?
Not often.
Not
that
often.
Was a rare call.
Well, and especially when we're doing the Lakers stuff, in fairness, they were winning 13 games a year. There weren't a lot of opportunities to call and praise management or the head coach.
But it's funny, though. I mean, we would get, more either comments or calls, stuff like that, criticism of Phil than we typically got a praise. I mean, to be totally honest. And that was Phil Jackson. Yeah. But I would say the ratio of criticism to praise was higher on the criticism.
And also, too, just as a cross-section, people who actually pick up the phone to call radio shows are your angriest people in your city.
Except you lovely people watching right now. You're great. You're fantastic. You're the best. Just to make sure you guys understand that.
No, but they're not. This isn't a call-in show.
No, I know, but you could wonder if it's a Venn diagram crossover. I'm just clarifying.
No, these very reasonable people.
Oh, they're awesome. They're not loons like those other people we're talking about.
It's the nature of being a fan. And if it isn't the manager, it's the general manager. Pick one of the two. The player will get the blame third. Always. Yeah,
I mean, and what's always interesting too is the weaker players often get more criticism than the Stars do. Depending on how, like, why aren't you better? Why did this guy screw this up again? It's like, well, because he's not that good, like, relative to the other people. Like, what do you want from him? I think that's what, this has been so great about this playoffs for the Dodgers is you've had, their best players have been very good for really important parts. Obviously, Seager has been just insane, and Buehler has pitched very well, and Kershaw, has had a good. He's a one-off game that was almost a good one. He's been good, and Bellinger has had some great moments after a really rough start to his playoff career. They've all kind of been there. Turner has turned it around. Like, the Dodgers Stars have played pretty well. Like, that's not the issue. I don't know what the issue would be. They're up 3-2 in the World Series, but it's a nice change. It happened for the Lakers with Anthony Davis and LeBron. Like, they won because players were coming through. Like, is there anybody you look at that you could say of the headliners who's been like a genuine disappointment in the playoffs?
I don't know. Is Kenley Jansen still a headliner? What do we think?
Yeah, question.
I think
he is, but
it's the attention of a headliner.
Should he be? That gets back to the question you were asking before. Like, are you blaming the lesser players?
I think there's no wrong answer to that question, because if you look at how much he's getting paid this year, that's big time closer money.
That's true.
If you look at that and say this guy should be a big time closer, then okay, that's a fair criticism. If you look at who he was for most of September, then are you expecting him to just dial it back? And the funny thing is, guys, is that in the middle of this series, he did. Like, he actually started to look pretty good there. And I don't think anybody wanted to hear his excuses at the end of Game 4, especially after he didn't back up home plate and stuff. But he genuinely.
It wouldn't have mattered. He wasn't going to get that ball.
No, but you still got to be there.
Go be where you're supposed to be. Absolutely.
It was a mistake on his part, and I think, though, to his credit, I listened to him talk post game, and he was saying, like, look, it's not like they beat me with these screaming line drives off the wall, and it's true, they didn't. Like, the Rays had 3 doinkers that and they're with a walk mixed into their best hitter, which I think was justifiable. Like it wasn't disaster.
Yeah, I stuck up for Kenley after the game. Like, should Gratterall have stayed in the game, and did Kenley Jansen pitch poorly, are not the same question. One is a Dave Roberts question, one is a Kenley question. And I realized, 1 and 2 against Phillips or whatever it was, you can't throw a ball that's hittable and all. Well, I mean, the guy hit, and I think it was either Jason Stark or Ken Rosenthal at The Athletic wrote about it, that that was the 39th hardest hit ball in a game with 54 balls put in play. That was the one that Phillips hit, and the one that whoever got on before him was like 53rd. And so that's what happened. Like, he shattered the guy's bat. Yeah. I mean, like, that happens. Like, that wasn't Kenley pitching poorly, and it can sound like an excuse, but he was right.
Oh, you got dragged on Twitter, son.
I did.
You got dragged.
I did, but except I was right. And he wasn't the guy who dropped the ball. I mean, he should have been backing up home plate, but it wouldn't have mattered. Nope. He didn't drop he didn't make the bad play in center, and he didn't drop the ball at home.
No, it's hard to draw any lasting conclusions from that play, because that was there were 4 different mistakes on that play, and they all conspired to decide the game. Like, it was a classic World Series game. I don't know if fans have had enough separation from it to appreciate it on that level, but
it's unbelievable.
Oh yeah, as somebody who had to write about it, it was very poetic.
I'll throw out another fun fact that Jason Stark had. The Dodgers had a lead in all 9 innings of that game. At some point, they led in all 9 innings of that game and managed to lose. It's only the 3rd time in history that has happened. They led in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th. The Dodgers have led in 73% of the innings of this series.
Yes, there had been no lead changes in a game in that series until the 6th inning of Game 4. And then all of a sudden it was a lead change, a tie, a lead change, a tie, a lead change in the final 4 innings. It was that was the most insane finish to a baseball game I can.
Okay, that leads well to 2 questions I want to ask. One from me, one from one of the viewers right now, but I get mine first because it's a cleaner seg.
And
Game 4 and Game 5. Yes, that's true. I run the damn thing. Game 4 and Game 5 it's putting you on the spot a bit, but is that the craziest 48 hours of baseball you've ever seen? like that you can recall? Because I mean, you've seen a lot of baseball, but what went on in those two games was insane.
Yeah, it was. You know what I will say? Two thoughts. The first, the only thing that comes to mind, and this is probably a failing of my long-term memory as much as anything,
well, you have
is
a
that
newborn, so that'll do it. Good luck remembering anything for the rest of your life.
Right. Oh, can't wait. So 2 years ago, the 1 year here in this Dodgers run of 8 consecutive division titles that was really dramatic was when the Rockies finished with the exact same record, and they played a game 163 at Dodger Stadium. And they won. Walker Buehler was amazing. He outdueled Germán Marquez. It was a classic game. It was really good. But when you think about all of the things that that could have happened and that did happen as a consequence of that, like if the Dodgers had lost that game, they would have had to fly to, I think, Milwaukee that night and play the next day or like the day after against the Brewers. And because they didn't, the Rockies did, and then they played the Brewers. And then I think the Brewers won and they went on to play the Cubs. Anyway, that's the first thing that comes to mind, was just the insane amount of travel that hinged on some very close baseball games. But with respect to games 4 and 5, I think maybe the most surprising thing to me was how little momentum mattered. Because if momentum meant anything, guys, the Dodgers would have given up 12 runs in the first inning of game. Right? Like that just completely crushed any notion that anybody should have had that momentum.
They would have been locked out of the park if momentum meant anything. Like for game 5, they wouldn't have found their way into the game.
Right. Will Smith would have shown up with Velcro in the back of his baseball.
And then here's from Granted LA. Does Hoornstra think they should keep Barnes at catcher for game 6 and 7?
Yeah, I do. I haven't exactly been beating that drum loudly, but I've brought it up a couple times that when you look at the Dodgers lineup, when you look at two things. One, when you look at who Will Smith is as a catcher, and the fact that, he's not as good of a framer, he's not as good of a blocker, and that's independent of how game 4 ended. Barnes is just the better defensive catcher. I think in a close series like this one really has become, those little things can make a huge difference, especially the framing. But then, two, if you look at who Austin Barnes is as a hitter, he's probably the one guy in the lineup who doesn't go up there expecting to hit a home run when he puts his best swing on a baseball.
Nor do any of us.
Austin Barnes is the most relatable player in the entire lineup.
We are all Austin Barnes.
Stars, they're just like us. That's Austin.
He is. I love Austin. He is. You don't want 9 guys like that, but I think having one of them really helps, because you ask him to put down a bunt like he was not too long ago, and he can do it because he's had to practice that, because he knows he's not a hitter who can hit.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing with Kike. Like Kike hadn't bunted in a game since 2018, and asking him to go do it in that game was awful. It was people think bunting is easy, just put the bat out there, but sacrifice bunting is really, really goddamn hard. And so asking a guy who hasn't done it in anything but BP in 2 years to do it in the World Series is stupid. They should stop doing those things.
Right. No, it's a completely different skill from hitting. It requires a different skill, and you have to practice it. You have to work on it. And Kike didn't.
I'm totally blanking on his name. What's the name of Kershaw's last personal catcher?
AJ Ellis.
AJ Ellis, like, who was basically on the team like an extra couple years just because of that relationship with Kershaw, or if not just because that had a big role in it, because he was Kershaw's dude, and like that comfort that guys like that, like Barnes is, like you said, a really good defensive catcher, even if he's not a reliable bat. What you do as a defensive catcher is so important, like not just for the game, but for like the psychology of that pitcher. Like, if Clayton Kershaw chooses you as his personal catcher, like you're doing something really well, because you know this better than either one of us. Kershaw's really picky. Like that guy doesn't just say, you know what? You make the decision for me. Whatever. I don't care.
Right. So Yasmani Grandal was the guy who basically took over for Ellis as the Dodgers starting catcher. And he was the far more complete baseball player. Offense, defense, framing, all of it. But Grandal had kind of a fatal flaw, which is that his brain was wired to frame every single pitch, which is useful for sure. But when you have a pitcher in Kershaw whose repertoire is so dependent on wasting the occasional slider in the dirt and getting guys to chase that, sometimes you just need a dude who's going to get down on both knees and block that and not try to frame it or do anything cute. And I think that Clayton never came out and said this. Certainly AJ Ellis and Yasmani Grandal did, but I think that's why Ellis persisted as Kershaw's personal catcher, is because AJ was a far better blocker. Same thing with Barnes. Barnes is both a better framer and a better blocker than Will Smith.
Well, it's a little like who is it? Paulie Andy in The Godfather. You won't be seeing him anymore. It's like, it's a little bit like that. So, hey, JP, you wrote a book, and I think it was published in 2015, the 50 greatest Dodger games of all time.
Yeah.
If you rewrote that today, how many games from these playoffs would have to be included?
Oh man, that's a good question. I would say, if you could have shown me like the next 5 years of Dodger history, I might have held off on publishing that because the team got really good after 2015. There have probably been like 6 games since then that I thought, wow, this is a classic. And in this postseason alone, oh boy, Game 4 of this World Series did not go the Dodgers' way, but there are games in that group of 50 that are just all-time classics, like the shot heard around the world, and Henry Aaron getting mobbed on the field because he broke Babe Ruth's home run record. That happened against the Dodgers. Like, how is that not just the most iconic moment in baseball history? And the way that Game 4 ended, I'd have a really hard time not putting that in there.
Yeah, that game was, again, disappointing, but that was epic. That game was epic. But like Game 7 of the Atlanta series got to be in there, right?
Yeah, I don't know if it has to be. I mean, they're all 50 really good games.
No, it has to be, JP. It has to be.
Well, he's the author, Brian. Let the author actually decide this.
Yeah. But like I said, there have been so many games just in the last 5 years. Like, think about Vin Scully's last home game at Dodger Stadium, ending on a walk-off home run by Charlie Culberson.
Yes.
Oh my God, Charlie! Oh my God, forgot about him.
How does that not go in there?
The infielder version of Austin Barnes, basically.
I forgot about him. By the way, for folks who want to see, this is the book we're referring to.
Nice.
JP's book. Please go pick that up. You will enjoy it. If you're a dot.
Why didn't you mention that you could have just put that over my face like this whole time?
We can't. I don't know how to move it to the right side.
Yeah, unfortunately, it always goes in the middle.
You can only cover the middle. There's a lot about this that we don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there is a way to do it. We just don't know how.
Hold on, let me try. There you go.
Hey.
I mean, you more comfortable with this? We can keep it there. It's an advertisement, and I guess gives you a binky.
I just put my San Jose Giants hat on.
Well, take it off.
Oh man. Yeah.
Speaking of, do you enjoy this? Look at that.
I do enjoy that.
Everyone
this
enjoys
this
that.
was Pedro Mora's first appearance on the show with his quarantine hair, and I happened to notice the similarity to Stoney version of Cody Bellinger. There's quite the similarity there.
Stoney Cody was the meme of the month, and I hope it persists a little bit beyond this month because it's really useful. I don't know if you guys noticed that.
Oh, okay. I mean, I've met Bellinger before, but I've not really spent any time around him at all. Is his personality similar to what people gather would be from Stoney Bellinger meme?
Yes and no. He does, for a guy who grew up in Arizona, he does have a sort of surferish vibe, just sort of that laid back young dude kind of vibe that kind of comes through. I wouldn't, the stoner thing is probably taking it one step too far, but there is something.
He's in a sport that tests.
Right.
You gotta be careful.
Yeah, there is something essentially laid back about his personality that is coming through there, though. I think that's very
I
true.
will say I've played baseball with people who are stoned. Like we had a guy, one of the guys I went to, my high school baseball team used to get really high before games, and like, man alive, like he said that just it slowed down the baseball and he could hit and all this other, and it was true. He's one of the best hitters in our lineup. He was also our first baseman, and he couldn't catch when he was high. So he sort of gave back like you had to you stick the glove out there, and it was really important that you hit it because he really didn't have a whole lot of range there in terms of catching. So you give a little, you get a little, but like we needed a DH. He'd have been perfect with a DH.
I can tell you guys, I'll say this for Cody. I can tell you guys some stories off air about players that you have heard of, but Cody Bellinger is not one of them. I have no stories about Cody in that realm. None.
We do have to make sure we save time for our game, which in honor of you, JP Hoornstra, is called Name That Horn. And
Thanks.
I don't know. See, you don't know this, JP. You were probably working the other night and doing constructive things or attending to your child or any of this other stuff. The last time I played a game, which was Friday, correct, Andy?
Yeah.
It didn't go well.
It really was me and Bergman.
Well. It was sort of
no. Was that me and Bergman that went poorly?
I believe so. It was the last game. It was the last show we did. And it was a game and it did not work. And
that was Thursday because Friday was the game that we played with Greg and Greg smoked.
Oh, right. No, it was Thursday.
This was Thursday.
Right.
And that game was a disaster. It was
terrible.
That was a complete shit show.
It was really bad.
Yeah, we're doing it again.
We're getting you. Look,
lucky you, JP.
The Dodgers didn't quit after game 2. You got to go back out there and play game 3. That's how this works. And so we're going to get out there and do it.
Speaking of stories, the kid from NYC, JP, any good Puig stories? People love a good Puig story.
Sure. I've got a few good Puig stories. Let's see. What are some good Puig stories that I can tell? Let's see. Do you guys remember when he was flirting with the idea of taking a helicopter into Dodger Stadium?
Yes.
Oh, I don't remember that.
This was, it wasn't his first year, but maybe 2015. Maybe 2015, I want to say. Google it. Anyway, he was flirting with the idea of taking a helicopter into Dodger Stadium to beat traffic. He didn't like the traffic in LA, which who does. And he had spoken to somebody. I forget how this came out. Anyway, a reporter goes up to him and says, "Hey, Puig, can we talk about this helicopter story?" And he says, "Oh no, sorry." And the reporter walks away. And then two minutes later, he's doing a group interview that starts in on baseball, and somebody says, "Hey, Puig, can you tell us what's up with the helicopter?" And he just gives the whole story to the entire group. And meanwhile, the poor reporter, who is not me, but it just broached him like a few seconds earlier, was standing off in the distance, having tried and failed to get the helicopter story while he's now giving it to this entire group. And I only mention that one because A, it's clean, and B, because I think it speaks to kind of what got Puig his reputation, but also got him kind of misunderstood, which is that he was just more weird than anything else. It was just very difficult to know what to expect from Yasiel Puig, whether you were his manager or his teammate or a reporter just trying to do your job.
This is very similar to exactly what Brian and I experienced and loved about Andrew Bynum covering him. Like Bynum was weird as hell, very, very unpredictable, did not give a shit what anybody thought, including often his teammates. And actually, I think even more than Puig, was just quote of the year. Like Bynum had no filter whatsoever. And on one hand, when he finally had worn out his welcome and he got traded to Philly, both of us totally understood why this happened. Like both of us were like, it was a year before he was up for free agency and a new contract. We're like, there's no way in hell you can give this guy a long-term deal. but we were also like, God, I miss him. Like,
So
he kept things interesting.
I know this is a tangent, guys, but you might be able
We're
to.
okay with that.
Okay, so you're maybe uniquely qualified to do this. My perception of Bynum from the outside is that he was like the James Maloney of the Lakers, in that he had kind of a quirky personality. He was always expected to be somebody that he was not, and eventually that
It's
rope.
a really interesting comparison.
Huh.
Because like Loney, because Loney was from the era that we actually were in the clubhouse a lot, and we covered that era. And he was not as weird as Andrew.
Okay.
By the way, totally underrated part of like locker room dynamics is that some of these guys are just really weird. Like normal people are really weird, but they just happen to be preternaturally good athletes. Yeah, that's a really like from
you know what,
what they were expected to be. I think it's a really fascinating point.
Taking this comparison even further, and JP, I believe you were on covering these teams as well. Loney was the one that in 2007, when there was the open feud going on between the established veterans versus the kids, Loney was asked about those guys as the leader.
Matt Kemp moved the trash can.
Yeah, Matt Kemp moved the trash can and caused that controversy. But Loney was asked about those guys, the veterans, about their leadership, and he said, "Who said they're leaders?" Like that was Loney actually that put it out there, and it was something that all year those younger guys had all been thinking. Like they had all been thinking about that, and finally he just said it.
And I think to your point, like I would never describe Loney as, well, I don't want to say never. Rarely would I describe him as weird based on his behavior, but in terms of somebody who was an independent thinker, who wasn't on select occasions unafraid to speak his mind.
Loney was a smart dude. Loney was a really smart dude, and Brian and I
presumably still is.
Yeah, that's true.
He's still with us.
But like Brian and I used to say all the time, like Bynum was in a lot of ways too smart for his own good as a professional athlete. Because like Drew was really smart enough, I think, to recognize, like, I don't have to do this. Like, not that a lot of other guys aren't smart. I mean, there are a lot of smart athletes, but like, Bynum was somebody that used to like take apart computers and put them back together, like just for funsies. Like, I mean, like he was a really, really smart guy who happened to be 7 feet, and really amazing hands.
Right.
But
every now and then you'll get a guy like that who reminds us that the actual work of being a professional athlete kind of sucks sometimes.
Yes.
And if you have the opportunity to say, forget this, guys, I can do something else. Every now and then you genuinely get a guy who's qualified to say that.
Yeah. It is fast. Like the amount, it's a great point, Jay, because like the amount of stuff that you have to do to stay at the highest level of these guys, especially in baseball, because like if in basketball, you slide down a tier, you can still go earn, $1.5 million, $1 million, whatever, doing something, go play in Russia or China or whatever, Italy. It's like not so bad.
It's 82 games. There's off days.
It's not so bad. Like the second tier in basketball isn't ideal. I'd rather play over here in the NBA than I would in Spain. But making $1 million to go play basketball in Spain, it's not the end of the world either.
I get it. Yeah.
Baseball
sounds awesome.
Right. I mean, baseball, like there's a really good chance if you're not playing Major League Baseball, you're like you're making like $48,000 playing in, Poughkeepsie or something. It's like
and I think they drug test in Poughkeepsie and not Spain.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. The kid from NYC said some Reddit guy, well, it's always going to lead somewhere good, but some Reddit guy said that since Puig spoke Spanish and Rue spoke Korean to talk, they both learned German. Have you heard anything about that? That's just so weird. I had to put it up there.
I never heard German spoken in the Dodgers clubhouse. Certainly not from those guys. But I will say this, Ryu, I remember him telling us very early on that in the Korean League, the number of Spanish-speaking teammates that he had vastly outnumbered the number of English-speaking teammates that he had. And his Spanish was actually his second best language, not his English.
So he would communicate more with the Spanish-speaking guys than the English-speaking guys.
If you guys remember this, like he and Wanu Ribe actually had a pretty good friendship on and off the field, and I'm guessing they spoke Spanish more than anything.
God, that's awesome.
So it was probably Spanish this week as well.
I remember there was, because I mean, Ryu, his conditioning was always a thing. And I remember there was one year where he had been injured for most of the year. And I came into the clubhouse and Ryu had magenta hair. And I was like, this to me feels like a bad sign about how much he's been keeping up his fitness, because he looks really bored right now. Like if he's just dyeing his hair crazy colors, I'm concerned.
Ryu is such an interesting guy. My suspicion about Ryu is that he had the best sense of humor of anybody in that clubhouse for a number of years, and it sucked because we never really got to see the full.
You know what's funny? Years ago for ESPN LA, I wrote a profile of Hiroki Kuroda, and when I went around talking to different guys on the team, one of the most common things that came up about him was he's hilarious. Like he's really, really funny. And you'd never know it because most people don't end up, most reporters don't end up speaking enough to him, without a translator. And I interviewed him a bit and I got a couple funny things from him, but like across the board, they all said the guy's hilarious.
Right. And it's so funny how that expresses itself with different players, because like Kike Hernandez, I think, is a genuinely funny guy.
Yeah.
But when you transcribe him after a game, it's not always there. It doesn't always come through. Some things just bring out different players' personalities. And maybe it's Ryu's magenta hair. Maybe it's for Kuroda having somebody to talk to in Japanese. But, for Kike, it's a camera. It's a camera.
Yes. Yeah.
That's all it takes.
Dude loves him a camera.
All right. It is time. We have reached that point because at some point we got to let you go. It is time for Name That Horn in honor of you, JP Hoornstra. And this is a game that involves the answer to these questions that I will ask you will be things that have horns, people with the word horn in their name.
Okay.
Or things or words that contain the word horn. So
okay.
The answer to the question could have horn in it somewhere, but the word might not be horn.
Already feeling convoluted.
Yeah, it is.
There we go.
But the clues are accessible. So here we go. Your name is your buzzer. So if you think you know the answer, you yell out your name, which in your case, JP would be
Hoornstra.
Or JP. He's fine. We don't have to be that formal.
Name the horn. Okay, JP. We'll go.
All right. So if you know the answer, yell out JP, but not too loud because you don't wake the baby. All right, here we go. I'll start with an easy one. The sports version of these don't have horns, but are definitely considered the greatest of all time. The sports version of these don't have horns, but are considered the greatest of all time.
Fuck are you talking about?
Sports
what?
version of these?
They're considered the greatest of all time.
JP.
Yes.
Is it goats?
It is goats. That is correct answer. Goats. JP 1-0.
All right.
Jay Leggett got it on the chat. He was ready to go.
My boy Jay.
All right, here we go. Next question. Let's do this one. This actor is best known for his roles in Bad Santa, Sling Blade, A Simple Plan, and the TV version of Fargo. Andy.
Billy Bob Thornton.
Billy Bob Thornton. Very good. Now your guys are in the swing of things. Number 3.
Boy, that's a reach.
I ran this by you and you're like, it all makes sense to me so far. And you're shut up. We're in this because of you. I was willing to back out. These vicious insects native to Asia are responsible for the decimation of honeybee population. Andy.
Murder hornets?
Murder hornets. Very good. All right, here we go. JP, you got to catch up. Here we go. This medium-sized toothed whale possesses a large tusk or horn from a protruding canine tooth. It lives year-round in the Arctic waters around Greenland, Canada, and Russia. It's a whale with a horn. What's it called?
JP.
JP.
Is this the narwhal?
This is the narwhal. Very good.
Okay, I was trying to think of an animal with a horn in the name, but you're correct. You said it
could be correct.
No.
By the way, was what you said. How you said to do it, Andy.
I know. I know.
All right, so it's tied at 2. Name that horn. Here we go. Next question. Horned animals that around Christmas time apparently play games they won't let Rudolph join.
JP, is this the reindeer?
This is the reindeer. Very good. Andy, now down 3-2. JP takes the lead and name that horn. In the movie number 6, I believe this is. In the movie Ace Ventura Pet Detective, he was Finkel and Finkel was him. Andy.
Einhorn.
Einhorn is the correct answer. Einhorn is Finkel. Finkel is Einhorn. JP, have you seen Ace Ventura?
It's, I mean, like in 1994 or whatever.
Okay, well,
yeah, sure.
You were at a
It's the
disadvantage.
exact year, by the way. Good job.
Really? Okay.
Yes,
Cool.
It was a big year for Jim Carrey. He had The Mask, Ace Ventura, and Dumb and Dumber all in the same year.
He remembers it well too, I'm sure.
Yes.
Number 7, this Hall of Fame infielder broke in with the Cardinals in 1915 at age 19. He'd finish his 23-year career with the Browns. JP.
Rogers Hornsby.
Hornsby. Very good. And just so you guys are aware, there will not be a Bruce Hornsby question because that would be repetitive.
I was hoping so. I was hoping there would be.
The pointy part of the rose inspired Proverbs and also arguably the best song written by Poison. JP.
Oh, damn it.
Thorn. Very good. JP now has the hang of it, and he is pulled ahead by 2. A symbol of abundance and nourishment. This horn-shaped container is overflowing with produce, flowers. JP.
Would this be the cornucopia?
Otherwise known as a
horn of plenty.
Horn of plenty is what we were looking for there. Although I probably would have accepted cornucopia. Only a couple more left, Andy. You're going to have to really hustle here. This gigantic Old South rooster is probably the most dated character in the Looney Tunes universe. JP.
Foghorn Leghorn.
A rare double horn. You get 2 points for that. You are now up 8-3.
Oh, wow.
Andy. Horn appears twice, so you get 2 points for that.
That feels arbitrary.
It is completely.
That feels
100% arbitrary. Only a couple left. This popular ESPN panel show. I feel like this game's really picked up. Yes.
Around the Horn.
Around the Horn. Very good. 8-4. Let's see. Let's do.
The show is actually little known. It was actually originally called Horn the Horn, so I should get a second point.
That is not true. You do not get extra points for that. Here we go. Last question. And Andy, you are down 8-4, but lucky for you, this question is worth 4.5. So no pressure, JP.
Okay.
This fictional crime fighter was created in 1936 as part of a radio play. In the television, Andy.
The Green Hornet?
The Green Hornet. Andy wins 8.5-8, and in what can only be considered a major upset for a guy who has Horn in his last name. JP Hoornstra loses. Name that horn.
I'm not a comic book guy. I would never. I don't want to say never. That would have taken me a while. And
would you have gotten Jeff Hornacek?
I would have. Mark Bellhorn. I was anticipating a Mark Bellhorn question.
There will be no Mark Bellhorn. I almost had a Rick Mahorn question.
If it makes you feel better, like if you hadn't gotten Narwhal, like I would have been sitting here for till the next show began, like just trying to come up with it. I'd have never had that. So nice work.
Oh, that's a good question. How is the Rams not an answer to one of these? That's a really good point.
I thought you were going to go with Joe Horn.
Musical instruments that are horns. I could have probably done well in that realm, but
I thought about Joe Horn, but I also thought Andy was begging for a flugelhorn question.
Well, because you were trying to come up with examples, like you were letting people behind the curtain. Brian was very concerned this game wouldn't work.
And at the beginning, I think that concern was valid.
Yes,
it really picked up momentum.
This game worked out. I will be honest, it did work out. So there you go.
But flugelhorn is a tough one, and then like French horn. But after that, most horns don't have the name Horn in the name.
No, it was a good game. You executed that pretty well, I think.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm the Austin Barnes, like Joe Thornton. I already had a Thornton though.
There you go.
That's true.
Can't go double Thornton.
Fun fact, JP, the Cam brothers' favorite Dodger is Andre Ethier. That's really Brian. Brian's held a grudge against Andre Ethier for about 10 years.
I did not like Andre Ethier.
Andre was another guy who he wasn't like Yasiel Puig in most ways, but in one of the ways, he could be a different dude on different days. And I will say this: I don't
Yes.
mind me putting this out there because it's complimentary to him. He's just been nothing 100% of gentleman, like since he retired. Like I can text him and ask him a question and he will get back to me right away and just be awesome about it.
That's cool.
I think he can be intense when he shows up to the ballpark, and that rubs.
Yes.
He was, I'll tell you what, he was one of those guys who he was just, when he was playing, he was one of those guys who like you would come and you talked. He'd go 2 for 4 with a double and a home run. You go talk to him. You're like, where were you guys yesterday when I struck out 3 times?
Yeah.
Okay, dude, you know how this works. We don't talk to you. Like, I mean, do you want me to come talk to you when you strike out 3 times? Like, I will. But he was a little hard for me to work with in that era. But that's just me, and a lot of people don't like me either. So anyway, he is the author. Put the book back up there, Andy. It'll cover your face. There you go. 50 greatest games of all time. JP Hoornstra. You can also catch all of his stuff at the Southern California News Group, which is like many different papers. So if you just Google like newspaper, JP comes up, and you can follow him on Twitter at JP Hoornstra.
Beyond game coverage, do you have anything you want to promote? Any appearances?
I'll probably be, hasn't been finalized, but you'll probably see me on Spectrum Sportsnet LA this off season.
Excellent.
Up there.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And you don't have to subscribe to Spectrum anymore to get that channel. So,
but if you did, it would still be worth it, just for you.
Right. I completely validate the cost of any cable package by myself.
Well, you know what? You are probably the solution to the cord cutting phenomenon that is hurting the industry right now.
People everywhere are trying to reattach their cord.
Exactly. They're catching up to the Hoornstra phenomenon. I appreciate the time, man. Thank you.
Cable magnates, my consulting fee is very affordable. That is the takeaway from tonight's episode.
It's very similar how Andy and I feel about television appearances. We forgot to do this where we tell people what's coming up tomorrow night. Roger Lodge, you guys know he's an Angels guy, but we're still going to have him on anyway. Do some pop culture, we'll do some baseball following Game 6. Wednesday night, George Sedano. Thursday or Friday, we're not quite sure yet. Ted Wynn from The Athletic has some great stuff out this week on Staley and what they're doing with the Rams defense. A really good football writer, breaks stuff down. So we'll have him on later in the week. JP, thanks so much, man. We really appreciate it. This was fun.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Brian. This was fun. Thank you for having me.
Anytime.
Appreciate it. We'll see everyone tomorrow. Dank you, Nederland.